3 months ago, my family left my grandfather sitting alone in a hospital discharge chair because my aunt said his care was too expensive. My mother agreed. Nobody wanted to argue about bills. Nobody wanted responsibility. So one by one, they left. My cousin said he had work. My aunt said, "Call us if something changes." My mother said, "We'll figure something out later." Later. That word still makes me angry. Because honestly, people say later when they mean never. I stayed. At first, I thought I was just helping my grandfather get home safely. That's all. But even sitting there, something felt strange. Grandpa Walter kept checking the hallway every few minutes. Kept touching the same old brown leather wallet like he was making sure it was still there. And every 15 minutes, he asked me the exact same question. "What time is it?" Again. And again. Like he was waiting for something. Or someone. Then, almost 2 hours later, a senior doctor walked down the hallway quickly, stopped cold, turned around, and looked directly at my grandfather. Complete silence. Then he quietly said, "Walter Carter?" Not confused, not casual, respectfully. The second he said Grandpa's full name, my stomach dropped. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a normal hospital moment anymore. My name is Megan Carter. I'm 29 years old. I live in Dallas, Texas. And that was the day I found out the man my family treated like a financial burden had once helped rebuild this hospital's emergency systems after one of its worst disasters. Honestly, what happened the next morning destroyed my family forever. If you're watching this right now, comment where you're watching from. And subscribe if stories like this hit differently for you. I read every comment. 3 months ago, I watched my family leave my grandfather alone in a hospital discharge chair like he was inconvenient luggage. But to me, Grandpa Walter Carter was never a burden. He taught me how to ride a bike, snuck me peppermint candy when my mom said no, called every birthday at exactly 7 a.m., even when his hands started shaking with age. He still remembered everyone else first. And honestly, watching my family treat him like a problem that day made me feel physically sick. It started after Grandpa's unexpected hospital stay, complications after a bad fall. A few tests turned into more tests, then more nights, then bigger bills. Grandpa wasn't poor. He owned his paid-off house, had retirement savings, but nobody wanted immediate medical costs touching their own accounts. And suddenly, my family started acting differently. My Aunt Deborah kept sighing dramatically every time paperwork came up. My mother kept checking her banking app in front of everyone. My cousin stopped answering messages about helping. And honestly, the conversation stopped being about Grandpa's health. It became about money. We were standing near the discharge desk when my Aunt Deborah finally said the sentence out loud. "We can't keep spending like this." The way she said it, cold, practical, annoyed. Like Grandpa was a subscription nobody wanted anymore. Then she added, "Someone has to be realistic." Honestly, that sentence still makes me angry, because people always call cruelty realism when they want to feel less guilty. I expected my mother to defend him, at least a little. Instead, she quietly nodded. Deborah's right. I just stared at her. Because this was her father. The man who worked double shifts raising her. The man who paid for her first car. And honestly, that moment hurt almost worse than my aunt's words. Because betrayal from strangers feels different. Betrayal from family changes something inside you. They moved Grandpa into one of those hospital discharge chairs near the hallway. Blue blanket, plastic wristband, half-finished paper cup of cold tea beside him. He looked smaller somehow, older, tired. But what broke me? He kept checking the hallway like he expected someone to come back. And honestly, that image still lives in my head. Because nobody should look that hopeful while being abandoned. If this story is hitting you emotionally, comment where you're watching from right now. And don't forget to subscribe. I'm reading every single comment. Grandpa kept touching the same old brown leather wallet over and over, worn edges, cracked fold, barely holding together, like he was making sure it was still there. Honestly, I thought maybe he was worried about cab money or hospital paperwork. But later, I'd realized that wallet mattered a lot more than I understood. One by one, they found reasons to leave. My cousin, I have work. My aunt, call us if something changes. My mother, we'll figure something out later. Later. That word. Honestly, everybody says later when they mean never. And within 20 minutes, the waiting area was empty. Except for me and Grandpa. Grandpa's old leather wallet slipped slightly open while he adjusted the blanket. A plastic card corner peeked out. Old, scratched, faded. I pulled it gently free. It wasn't a bank card. It was an old hospital access badge, expired decades ago. Black and white photo, younger version of Grandpa. Same eyes, same name. Walter Carter. Honestly, that was the first moment something stopped making sense. Because random abandoned patients don't carry hospital access badges from 40 years ago. Every 15 minutes, Grandpa asked me the same question. What time is it? Again. And again. Like he was waiting for something. Or someone. Honestly, I thought maybe he was confused from medication, or worried about getting home before dark. But now, I think he already knew something I didn't. Almost 2 hours later, a senior doctor walked down the hallway quickly with another staff member. Then suddenly, he stopped, turned, looked directly at Grandpa, completely froze, then quietly said, "Walter Carter?" And honestly, the second he said Grandpa's full name, I knew this wasn't a normal hospital moment, because his voice didn't sound confused. It sounded respectful. The senior doctor stopped walking the second he saw my grandfather. Not the polite pause doctors usually do. Not confusion. Recognition. Real recognition. Then he stepped closer and repeated, "Walter Carter?" Grandpa looked up slowly, small smile, and quietly answered, "It's been a while." Honestly, the way they looked at each other made my entire stomach drop. Because this wasn't stranger energy. This felt like history. The doctor immediately shook Grandpa's hand with both of his, then said something that completely stunned me. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry I didn't know you were here." Sorry? Honestly? Doctors don't apologize to random discharge patients like that. Not like this. Not personally. And suddenly, the grandfather my family treated like a financial burden was being treated like someone important. That same nurse from earlier came back almost immediately, but now, everything about her tone changed. Fresh blanket, warm tea, extra pillow. She even adjusted Grandpa's chair herself. And honestly, the shift was impossible to miss, because 30 minutes earlier, we were just another delayed discharge. Now, hospital staff were acting like someone significant had been overlooked. Right as this was happening, my mother called me, casual voice, like nothing happened. "Did you get him home yet?" I just stared at my phone. Honestly, that question made me angrier than I expected. Because she didn't ask, "Is he okay? Does he need anything?" Just logistics, like Grandpa was a delivery problem. While waiting, I noticed an old framed black and white photo hanging near the hallway. Hospital ribbon-cutting ceremony. Dozens of people. Old suits. Vintage hairstyles. And honestly, one face looked weirdly familiar. A much younger man. Standing near the center. Same eyes. Same jawline. My grandfather. Then a hospital social worker suddenly appeared, clipboard in hand, concerned expression. She asked softly, "Mr. Carter, has your family arranged transportation and aftercare?" Honestly, I almost laughed. Because technically, yes, they arranged abandonment. And for the first time, saying that reality out loud made it feel even uglier. The doctor offered to move Grandpa somewhere more comfortable, Private room upstairs. Immediate care support. But Grandpa quietly shook his head. Not that floor. The doctor paused. Like he understood exactly what that meant. Honestly, that was the moment the mystery got bigger. Because clearly, Grandpa had history here I knew absolutely nothing about. Grandpa's wallet slipped from his hand while adjusting the blanket. Cards scattered. Old receipts. A faded photo of Grandma. And honestly, seeing how carefully he picked up that old hospital badge again told me something important. This wasn't random nostalgia. That place meant something personal. I texted my Aunt Deborah. The hospital knows Grandpa somehow. No reply for 5 minutes. Then suddenly, 3 messages. What do you mean? Who knows him? Did someone say something about money? Honestly? That last question caught my attention immediately, because suddenly, it sounded like she was scared of something specific. Then the hospital administrator walked in. Suit, badge, perfect posture. Not normal discharge staff. He walked straight toward my grandfather, shook his hand respectfully, then said, "Mr. Carter, thank you for waiting." Thank you? Honestly, that sentence changed everything. Because nobody thanks abandoned patients like honored guests. And suddenly, I knew my family had made a massive mistake. The hospital administrator asked if we could move somewhere quieter. Not the waiting room. Not discharge. A private consultation room upstairs. Honestly, that's when my hands started shaking. Because abandoned patients don't get escorted into executive rooms. Grandpa stood slowly, held his old wallet tightly, and walked like he already knew exactly where he was going. Like this building held memories I knew nothing about. Inside the consultation room, the administrator opened an old archive binder. Yellow paper, old newspaper clipping, hospital expansion photo. And there he was. A younger Walter Carter. Hard hat, blueprints in hand, standing beside hospital executives. Honestly, my hands started shaking, because suddenly, Grandpa wasn't just connected to this place, he helped create part of it. I looked at Grandpa immediately, waiting for an explanation. Anything. But he just adjusted his blanket quietly and looked away. No denial. No surprise. Nothing. Honestly, that silence told me more than words. Because innocent confusion looks different. This felt like someone who'd spent years keeping something buried. The administrator sat across from me and folded his hands, then calmly said, "Your grandfather helped this hospital during one of its darkest crises." I just stared. Honestly, that sentence didn't even make sense, because my family acted like Grandpa barely managed his own retirement. And suddenly, the story I grew up believing about him felt incomplete. Then the senior doctor corrected something. It wasn't financial donations. Silence. He leaned forward slightly, then added, "Your grandfather volunteered thousands of hours helping redesign this hospital's emergency response systems after a catastrophic fire decades ago." I stopped breathing for a second, because my family left him behind over medical costs, while he once helped protect lives inside the same building. The administrator opened an archive drawer, then carefully pulled out an old newspaper clipping. Yellow edges, folded corners, decades old. And honestly, the headline made my stomach drop. "Local engineer helps rebuild hospital after devastating fire." The photo beside it? A younger Walter Carter. Hard hat, rolled blueprints, standing beside hospital staff. And suddenly, the grandfather my family treated like an expense looked like someone who once helped save this place. I was angry, hurt, and honestly, I wanted them to see exactly who they walked away from. So I sent one picture into the family group chat. Nothing else. Less than 30 seconds later, my mother called me, voice shaking. Then I heard something hit the floor. Her phone. Because suddenly, the father she abandoned in a discharge chair wasn't who she thought he was. My Aunt Deborah called right after. Too fast. Too panicked. And the first thing she asked wasn't, Is Dad okay? It was, what exactly did they tell you? Honestly, that question changed everything. Because suddenly, it sounded like my aunt already knew pieces of this story. Grandpa looked exhausted, then quietly looked down at the faded photo inside his wallet. A picture of my grandmother, young, smiling, alive. Then softly said, after your grandmother died, they wanted ceremonies, recognition, plaques. I stared at him. Why? He gave a tired little smile, then answered, helping people isn't family currency? Complete silence, and honestly, that sentence changed everything. Because suddenly, this wasn't a secret hidden for power. It was dignity. The senior doctor finally looked directly at me, then quietly said, your grandfather helped build the emergency response system this hospital still relies on. Complete silence. I just stared at him. Because suddenly, the man my family abandoned over medical costs had once helped save lives inside the same building. And honestly, that truth hit harder than anything I'd heard all day. Because my family called his care too expensive, while sitting inside a hospital partly protected by work he helped create. The hospital administrator contacted Grandpa's listed emergency family contacts after discharge concerns escalated. That's why my family came back. Not guilt, not love, procedure. And honestly, that truth made their sudden concern feel even uglier. Then normal chapter continue. The second my family found out the hospital knew Grandpa, everything changed. My mother started calling nonstop. My Aunt Deborah sent message after message. My cousin suddenly asked, is Grandpa okay? Honestly, that question made me angry immediately, because just hours earlier, nobody wanted responsibility. Nobody wanted bills. Nobody wanted inconvenience. But now, suddenly, everybody cared. My Aunt Deborah arrived at the hospital out of breath. No apology, no guilt, no concern. The first thing she asked me was, did they ask about his estate paperwork? I just stared at her. Honestly, that was the exact moment I understood something ugly. She wasn't scared Grandpa was dying. She was scared there was something she didn't know. My mother arrived 10 minutes later, already crying, already emotional, already performing regret. Then immediately said, we never abandoned him. Honestly, that sentence made my stomach turn. Because memory gets real flexible when guilt meets witnesses. Just hours earlier, she literally left her father in a discharged chair. And now, suddenly she wanted a cleaner version of the story. Grandpa said almost nothing while all this happened. He just sat quietly holding that old leather wallet, watching everybody, listening. And honestly, that silence felt heavier than yelling. Because older people learn something painful. When people suddenly become kind after new information, it usually isn't love. While my family argued quietly, 2 nurses passed the doorway. One glanced inside, then whispered softly to the other, that's him? The other nodded. Honestly, that tiny moment hit me harder than another dramatic speech. Because respect doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it shows up in whispers. The administrator quietly asked to speak with me privately, then revealed something I wasn't prepared for. Years ago, Grandpa helped Deborah financially too, massively. Medical debt, legal bills, emergency mortgage help. And honestly, the aunt calling him expensive today once survived because of his generosity. That's when everything clicked. Not all details, but enough. My mother, my aunt. They knew Grandpa helped people, knew he gave money quietly, knew he sacrificed for family constantly. Honestly, that betrayal hit differently. Because this wasn't ignorance anymore. This was entitlement. For the first time all day, Grandpa raised his voice, not loudly, but enough. He looked directly at Deborah and said, stop talking about money while I'm still sitting here. Complete silence. Honestly, that sentence broke me, because even abandoned, he still had more dignity than everyone around him. My cousin had stayed quiet the whole time, then suddenly asked, "So, what exactly was Grandpa's role here?" I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Honestly, that question proved everything. Nobody wanted Grandpa, they wanted possibility. The senior doctor stepped into the room, looked directly at my family, then calmly said, "The man you abandoned helped keep this hospital running long before any of you ever walked into it." Complete silence. No movement, no excuses. Honestly, I'll never forget their faces, because finally, truth said out loud sounds different than guilt whispered privately. After the doctor said, "The man you abandoned helped keep this hospital running long before any of you walked in here." Nobody spoke. Not my aunt, not my mother, not even my cousin. Then Grandpa slowly adjusted his blanket, looked at everyone, and quietly said, "Interesting how expensive I became once I needed something back." Honestly, that sentence hit harder than yelling ever could, because truth spoken calmly cuts differently. My mother started crying immediately, not graceful tears, real crying, the kind that makes people look smaller. Then she whispered, "Dad, we didn't mean..." Grandpa raised his hand gently, stopped her. Honestly, watching him silence her that easily felt surreal, because all day, he'd looked fragile, but suddenly, he was the strongest person in the room. Grandpa opened that old leather wallet slowly, the same one he protected all day, then pulled out a tiny faded photograph. It was my grandmother. Young, smiling, holding hospital paperwork. Grandpa stared at it quietly, then softly said, "She always told me family would matter more than buildings." Honestly, that line broke me, because suddenly, this was never about money. It was about heartbreak. My Aunt Deborah immediately switched strategies. Now suddenly, she was emotional, regretful, soft voice. "Dad, you know that's not fair." Fair? Honestly, I almost laughed. Because abandoning your father in a hospital chair, then arguing about fairness, takes a level of audacity I still can't process. Grandpa looked directly at Deborah, then said one sentence I'll never forget. "I paid your mortgage when your children needed stability. Today you left me overparking validation." Complete silence. Honestly, that sentence destroyed her. Because receipts spoken calmly in front of witnesses, absolute emotional devastation. My cousin avoided eye contact completely now. No inheritance questions, no attitude, nothing. Then quietly said, "I didn't know." Grandpa looked at him for a long second, then answered softly, "That's the problem. None of you wanted to know." Honestly, that line hit all of us, because indifference can hurt just as much as cruelty. My mother finally admitted something painful. After Grandma died, she emotionally checked out, stopped visiting enough, stopped asking questions, stopped paying attention, then quietly whispered, "It became easier to assume you were okay." Honestly, that confession hurt deeply, because neglect rarely starts dramatic. It starts with emotional laziness. The hospital administrator asked about discharge plans again. Silence. Nobody volunteered. Not my aunt. Not my mother. Nobody. So I stood up and said, "He's coming home with me." Honestly, that was the easiest decision I made all day. Because love isn't complicated. People make it complicated when convenience matters more. On the drive home, Grandpa stared out the window quietly, then finally said something that absolutely broke me. "I wanted family, not gratitude." Honestly, that sentence carried more sadness than anger, because he never wanted praise, never wanted recognition, never wanted power. He just wanted not to be left behind. 3 months ago, my family left my grandfather sitting alone in a hospital discharge chair because his care was too expensive. But the truth? The expensive thing wasn't his treatment. It was their lack of character. And honestly, the hospital revealing who Grandpa was changed everything, but not because of money. Because for the first time, I saw exactly who my family became when compassion cost them something. And I'll never forget that. Because they left my grandfather to save money, while relying on systems he once helped build.